welcome. One area of comic books that I'm inadequate to discuss is manga. My exposure to it, and my interest in it, has been limited. By the time manga exploded and became popular in this part of the world, the bulk of what was published didn't appeal to me. For the most part, the available translated content was too youth-oriented. While I could identify with the themes and concerns of younger people, because, I used to be one, I was way past a time when overly melodramatic conflict was interesting. Again, I'm generalizing, but what I saw available was too surface level. It was dynamic and fresh, but at the same time, it lacked depth. Nowadays, with the proliferation and the wide variety of manga available, there must be something, a whole pile of somethings actually, that must appeal to me. I just have to go out and find it. So that's the point of this video series, looking for manga to enjoy. I only have one more thing to add to this introduction. I'm probably going to mispronounce a lot of names and titles. So, if you could give me a little latitude in that area and not mock me too heavily for my errors, that would be awesome. With that in mind, let's move forward. Goodnight Pun Pun chronicles the early years of the protagonist, Pun Pun. The first volume, which is the only one I've read so far, focuses on his late childhood. Like most children, his innocent beliefs are starting to disassemble and life is becoming more and more complicated. For example, he's obsessed with Aiko and he will do anything to please her. But, being a child, he doesn't know how to do that other than on a very basic level. Also, his family is falling apart. His father is a drunk who wallows in his incapabilities as both a parent and a husband. And his mother is a self-involved, abusive personality who takes out her frustrations on Pun Pun. What is most interesting about the series are the artistic choices within the story. Pun Pun and his immediate family are represented as abstract birds, while everything else is rendered with attention to realism. Pun Pun is able to summon God with a childlike magical phrase, and God appears as a cheaply photocopied version of what I presume is the actual creator of the series. Also, Pun Pun doesn't speak. His dialogue is told to us by an omniscient, unseen narrator. Creatively speaking, it's pretty amazing. My only actual criticism is the story itself. Personally, I'm not a fan of stories where kids lose their innocence and see the world for what it is. This is a pretty easy device to use in order to break the reader's heart. The movie, Grave of the Fireflies, is a perfect example of this technique done perfectly, by the way. That being said, I'm not suggesting the story of Goodnight Pun Pun is poorly done, because that would be untrue. I'm just saying, for my tastes, stories that take place in late childhood are not compelling, and they ordinarily end on a heartbreaking plot beat. From the little I've read about the future of the series, Pun Pun does get older and the story gets darker, so I am looking forward to seeing where this develops. The premise of Dorohedoro is that magicians from one realm invade another realm to practice magic. In the case of the protagonist, he had his head transmuted into a lizard head by one of these invading magicians. He spends his days hunting down and trying to find the magician that horrifically transformed him so the process can be reversed. While that sounds interesting, I can't say I found it all that engaging. All the characters felt very stereotypical, and the comedic elements felt unnecessary and fell flat. Also, I hate to say this, but the artwork made it difficult to follow the action in certain scenes. It didn't flow that well from panel to panel. As an example, the opening scene. I was absolutely lost as to what was happening. Once the scene was over and it was clear what had just happened, it seemed more cohesive. But it was visually confusing without that context at the beginning. I will say Dorohedoro does a good job establishing the worlds the story takes place in, and it also sets up the premise and motivations for the characters reasonably well. However, it all feels very surface level and kind of generic. Perhaps the series develops a lot more in the ensuing volumes, but I can't say that I'm all that interested in seeing whether this occurs. Claymore is a series about young women who have been given demon blood in order to have the capabilities necessary to fight demons. It's a very simple premise, but it is very well done. Like Goodnight Pun Pun, the elements of Claymore make it an interesting read. It really has a spaghetti western vibe to it. The protagonist, Claire, walks into a town, says as little as necessary, defeats the evil being she's been hired to kill, and then moves on. She doesn't pause to celebrate or look for validation or praise from those she just saved. She just sheathes her sword and walks away. Claire is a character that comes off as distant or detached from the rest of humanity. She doesn't come off as cold, though. I don't know, I got the sense there was a touch of sadness in her perpetually blank face. Certainly the violence she regularly faces has taken its toll on her, but not enough to say she's completely a desensitized, inhuman killing machine. She's just a cipher, and that makes for a very compelling character. Claire is also followed around by an unnamed man who is responsible for giving her assignments. Presumably, this man works for whatever organization there is that creates and sends these young women to fight demons. He seems to have some perceptible contempt for Claire, and he does not care one way or the other whether she survives the battles he sends her in to fight. In return, Claire seems to have very little regard for this man. He points her in the right direction, and that's all she needs from him. The overall narrative is very tight, direct, and evenly paced. It's also well grounded in the reality it establishes. The world and the main characters feel genuine. It is, basically, a very solid action story with supernatural elements. Uzumaki is a series of short horror stories involving a theme and a fictional location. The protagonist is Kiri Goshima, a teenage girl who witnesses and narrates all these strange occurrences in her village. The theme that ties all of these bizarre events together is exploring how spirals manifest in everyday life. The series does make a good case for why an innocent-looking spiral pattern is a gateway to horror. However, it is a series that asks you to go along with the premise and not to question why things are happening. In other words, things just happen, and there's no indication how they happen. They just do. If you're someone that prefers a more grounded narrative, then this will be a less than satisfying experience. Overall, the series excels in creepy and disturbing imagery. The narrative is kind of flimsy though, and it feels like it's a device being used to get to a place where high visual weirdness can occur. In that respect, it's really reminiscent of an anthology horror comic. Of course, it also has to be acknowledged that this, like all manga, are serialized. There's limited space, events have to move quickly, and, for stories of this nature, there has to be a shocking reveal on or slightly before the final page. So once condensed into a single volume, the flaws do tend to stand out. In that context, the thin narrative can be justified and slightly overlooked. Alright, so not a bad start. The only series I was kinda meh about was Dorohedoro. Although Uzumaki was interesting, I might not continue with it. There is only 3 volumes to the complete series, so maybe I will finish it just to see where it goes. Claymore is definitely a series I will continue with to its conclusion. And I think I'll like Goodnight Pun Pun once the lead character gets older and the series gets a tad more mature. That's it for today. Like, share, subscribe, and comment, and I will talk at you later. Until next time.